Welcome to the Fishing Daily podcast. And in this episode, I am joined by Cynthia Ní Mhurchú, Ireland South MEP. And Cynthia will be talking about the public meeting that will be held in Castletownbere on Thursday night regarding the fishing industry crisis. Welcome, Cynthia.
Míle mágat, Oliver. And in fact, disclosure here now, you're going to be on the panel as well. So the main reason, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about this meeting, but the main reason for it is really to go into listening mode and then go into active mode after that. Because I suppose the blows that the fishing industry has received over the last number of months, even indeed years, but months in particular, has been nothing short of cataclysmic and disastrous. And I suppose the final blow, or one of the final ones recently that propelled me into action, was the PESH Council Committee meeting just before December, when the Hague Preference Agreement that had been there through custom and practice for up to 50 years was lost. And there was essentially a ganging up of a majority of EU countries against Ireland to ensure that the Hague Preference would continue on, and to the advantage of Ireland, an advantage which was a very carefully worked out advantage. It wasn't an unfair advantage for Ireland in any way, but it was an advantage that at least was a lifeline for the industry. But even now, that's gone. So look, the objective of the meeting is to really be seen to be there in person, not just an MEP, Cynthia for Ireland South, out in some parliament in Brussels or Strasbourg, to be there in the room, in the golf club in Berehaven, and to have people like yourself on the panel. I appreciate you're going to be online, but we will have people in person there, and I can tell your audience more about that, and your viewers and listeners more about that. But we also will have a Q&A session at the end. And I hope and I intend that there will be action and follow through on this. So, for example, Commissioner Cadiz, who's the Commissioner for Fisheries and Marine and so forth, and Clean Oceans and all of that. I met with him about a month ago online. I raised issues arising from the council meeting in December. I raised the concerns of the fishermen and the fisherwomen and the communities, particularly the Fishing Alliance, with whom I meet regularly. That will be Patrick Murphy, A. O'Donnell, and many other members, because it brings together many different fishing groups. But I raised those issues with him and I said, look, Commissioner, this is not a once-off. I'll have to keep in touch with you. And so he has said to me that he wants feedback from the meeting. And I'm also bringing a member of my group in Europe. I'm in Renew Europe, as you can see from the sign behind me. I'm bringing a member from my Renew Europe political group in the Parliament, and her name is Johanna Agrigosia Martinez. She's a Basque MEP, and she sits on the PESH committee, or the fisheries committee in the Parliament, and I'm bringing her along with her expertise, with her team. And I'm also going to have an advisor called Jesper Krog. He's a fishing advisor with, again, Renew Europe, my political group in the Parliament. And he has a deep interest and a deep knowledge of fishing over many years. He worked on the PESH committee with an MEP who was one of the vice chairs on that committee from Denmark. So he's coming along to give a European perspective. So is Johan. And then we will have, as I mentioned, Patrick Murphy in person on the panel. We'll have A. O'Donnell, as I know him as. Trees Hail Magay from Donegal, Brendan Byrne, and Brendan, of course, is involved with the processors and represents them. He'll be on the panel in person. I'm hoping that Senator Manus Boyle from Tirchonner will be with us, Erlina, not just confirmed just yet. Yourself, Erlina Homa, and I've sent a big shout out to most of my Fianna Fáil fellow councillors to see if any of them could come, and in particular Michael Cahill Choctadala, and Michael, of course, recently got elected, in the last election, and he's from that neck of the woods, and he sits on the fishing committee in Dáil Éireann. So look, if some of these people that I've mentioned laterally don't come, it doesn't matter. They're part of my stakeholder group. I will be talking to them, and not just Fianna Fáil members. I mean, I'm talking to all the members of the PESH committee, and indeed our Sinn Féin Cathaoirleach, who's based down in Waterford. Only this morning I was in touch with him, and he sent his apologies. And indeed, the main person, or Nara, our Minister for Fisheries, Timmy Dooley, he unfortunately had a clash in his diary with regards to this Thursday. But he has sent a letter, which I will read out at the meeting. He will be sending a video, and I will be keeping him in the loop as well. So we really all need to collaborate, as you know, Oliver, I've done a few interviews about this meeting, and I appreciate the media will always say, "Oh, Tatwig Snob," and I guess that you're kind of swimming against the tide here. Father, we have this problem going on and on and on forever, and the politicians and previous MEPs, previous politicians in Ireland, national politicians, don't seem to have been able to make progress, particularly on the back of the disastrous Brexit agreement, where we lost a huge amount of quota. But I firmly believe, Oliver, that negotiations and arguments and, I suppose, deputisations and getting traction from the likes of a commissioner, it really does depend on who you're talking to, who the commissioner is at the time, and then who's doing the talking. And do you have enough of a concerted voice, a big voice to bring together? So, look, I'm just one in that stakeholder group, but I hope that we can build on this and increase the stakeholder group and increase the traction, the voice, the amount of correspondence with Commissioner Cadiz. And of course, Commissioner Cadiz met recently with Minister Timmy Dooley. I mean, they're constantly talking, but it's about keeping the plight, and it is a plight, on cruel costs on Níoscadín. It's about keeping their plight to the forefront of Commissioner Cadiz's agenda and making sure that there's a level playing field for Ireland, but also in relation to the rest of Europe. Because essentially what happened in December was, apart from the ganging up that I've spoken about with regards to Ireland in relation to the Hague preferences being abolished or not available for the year, scrapped for the year. And since then, we've also seen the non-EU countries, Faroe Islands and Iceland and Norway and UK, basically deciding on their own quota on the basis of a line of advice which was way below the line of advice that the EU adopted in relation to the pelagic fish. And that has created an unfair playing pitch, not just for Ireland, but for European countries and the 4 non-European countries. So this is a European question as well. I mean, obviously, I can't, and one doesn't in Parliament, one doesn't always expect that you will gain traction only for your own nation. There's got to be a European interest as well in collaboration.
Cynthia, from your perspective, what's this significant structural and economic challenges currently facing the Irish fishing industry?
I just say at the outset that I've been doing a crash course in the issues pertaining to fishing and to the fishermen and fisherwomen since I got elected in 2024. So I am not holding myself out as an expert in relation to policy, the politics of the policy over the last number of decades. But I am willing to read, listen, learn and advocate. And I suppose that's what I did as a barrister. So when I give you my own perspective of where I think we're coming from, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is in any way an expert's view. But from my negotiations with the Fishing Alliance and other groups, and meeting with fishermen and fisherwomen, obviously Brexit and the European Union and the UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement is all of that, the post-Brexit, if you want to call it that. I mean, it was Armageddon because, as I've mentioned already in the last couple of minutes, our fishing quota was reduced drastically, and it affected us, obviously the worst in Europe because we're right next door to the UK. So I think the relative stability rule under the European Union's common fishery policy, it locks in outdated allocations, and that's why the common fisheries policy is up for review, in fact a little bit overdue for review. That word outdated is very important because really what I see happening, Oliver, is that the fishing industry in Ireland is operating on a fisheries policy or a fishing policy that is just not in step. It's not in time. It's not suitable for purpose for what's really happening. And the other issues obviously are, like every industry, in fairness, I listen to farmers, I listen to small businesses, I listen to a lot because I'm also a member in the European Parliament on the Internal Market Consumer Protection Committee, which is a heavy-hitting sort of business committee, but rising operational costs. So we know that everybody's inputs are going up, but let's deal with the fishers and the fishermen and the fisherwomen and the fishing industry. So you've got compliance issues, insurance issues, you've got fuel costs, you've got all those costs coming together. And then we have an ageing workforce So the fishermen and fisherwomen mightn't be able to go out as often, as frequently, as far. They mightn't be able to put in the same amount of hours and so forth. And then that piece about succession, if you want to call it succession, it's a fancy word for saying who is a fisherman, fisherwoman going to hand on the business to. I mean, they need to get a price for their business if they want to retire or if they want to reduce their hours. And of course, the succession piece, attracting new people, and that problem is huge. Not only in the fishing industry, but I'm just talking about the fishing industry now. It's massive. And you and I just spoke about that before we started to record. And I was asking you about whether there was anybody in your family that continued fishing when you gave up the fishing, and you explained no, that, and I don't want to personalise this to you or anybody, but a younger member in your family, just didn't see maybe a future. I'm paraphrasing what you said, and you can correct me if you want, Oliver, but didn't see a future for himself in it. And we desperately need to look at that particular problem and make it easier for our younger fishing community to stay involved, to get involved, to gain the experience, because there may not be the same amount of industry and life in the industry for fishing, but we are talking about offshore wind farms now. This is a new reality. Will it come on fast enough for our young fishermen, fisherwomen? I don't know, but we do need to look at it. And even recently I was in touch with just a colleague of mine from Radio Gaeltacht, a former colleague of mine, Radio Gaeltacht, down in the southwest. And she was talking about the fishing permits that young fishermen, fisherwomen want to get in order to be able to train up and get their licenses and get all their compliance in order for future business in this regard, and whether or not this education for them could be rolled out online, because it's very difficult for the youngsters or even people who've got families to be leaving families for a long period of time to go and get their training. So there's that issue. And then long-term policy decisions in general, what I'm hearing from the industry, that the long-term policy decisions, they've really weakened the sector over the years. So they would be the main issues. And the objectives then, like I spoke about, severe recent events on foot of the PESH Council meeting. So there are obviously pressing emergencies going on, particularly with regards to the mackerel season being over in March. And because of this agreement that the 4 non-EU countries came to, which was way above the quota, they awarded themselves unilaterally a quota, which was way above what the EU gave its countries. And as a result, this hit Ireland the worst, because we have such a large percentage share of mackerel. And our mackerel season this year, I'm informed, is from January to March. So this is a very pressing issue as to whether anything can be done between now and March. And of course, there's only about a month left. So that's very pressing. And it is something that I particularly raised with Commissioner Cadiz. And I did hear subsequent to the meeting that there was some progress made in relation to Commissioner Cadiz negotiating with these 4 non-EU countries to try and level the playing pitch. And rightly so. I mean, to be honest with you, Oliver, I think Europe really needs to stand up for itself in terms of this overfishing issue of the non-EU countries, because it's going on for years. I'm hearing about this since 2024, since I got elected. But I understand it's been going on for years prior to that. And I appreciate there are always political sensitivities around countries outside of the EU, because we need an operational and a political cooperation with them with regards to security now and defence. That's hugely important. I get that. But at the same time, we do have to raise these issues as well when there's something so blatantly obvious as what was agreed in recent months that is going against not just Irish fishers, but European fishers.
Well, some of the Norwegians will argue the fact that the EU shouldn't be sitting at the coastal states table because it's not a coastal states. And some of them would tell you that Ireland should be sitting at the table and negotiating and not having somebody from Europe sitting there, because the majority of the fishing now anyway takes place in waters that's not European or EU waters. It's mainly in Scotland, Scottish waters. Norwegian waters are international waters. But going forward, as in your role as a member of the European Parliament, how do you think that you can influence decisions, or what can you bring to the fishing community in terms of what you can do within the Parliament?
Well, loads, as far as I'm concerned, right? I can do loads, and I'm happy to do loads. And I'll tell you what the loads is. Number one, I'm not a full member or even a part-time member, what they call it, a substitute member of the PESH committee. And that's regrettable that there was no Fianna Fáil MEP out of the four who decided and arranged and agreed to go on that committee. It was considered, but perhaps not considered enough. I have sought to investigate whether I can go on it, but I would have to swap off one of my other committees. Now, the reason I mention that is I want to reassure listeners, viewers, that just because I'm not a member, full or substitute, doesn't mean I can't go to meetings. So what I intend to do is, and in fairness to my Fianna Fáil colleagues now, particularly Barry Cowan and Billy Kelleher, we have decided that we will attend the PESH committee meetings. Now, this is a heavy-hitting committee. Like, it makes decisions. The commissioner has to be answerable to it, and vice versa. You know, the members take on the commission and their policies. So we've decided as a threesome of MEPs for Fianna Fáil that we will keep a watching brief in rotation on it. So already I've attended that meeting, and I've spoken up particularly about this quota that the four non-EU countries took and agreed amongst themselves unilaterally to Europe's detriment. Other MEPs, by the way, spoke up about it at the same meeting. I mean MEPs from other countries. So this is about me forming alliances. The Commission were in the room there with the Commission, as in DG PESH, so the Commissioner's Secretariat below him, and the Commissioner's team. So this is part of the stakeholder map. So what happens is I go to a meeting, I speak, I make connections, and then I start meeting people, writing letters. The next thing is I can send in parliamentary questions, PQs. I can also feed back into Minister Dooley's department. I can also set up meetings between the Fishing Alliance and also then coming to Europe and meeting like-minded MEPs within the Renew Europe group. And then beyond that group, the MEPs that come from other groups that are on the PESH committee, which is the Fishing Committee. So what does this all amount to? Look, it's a long, hard slog, Oliver. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? You need to get right. But we have a 5-year mandate here for myself and the other MEPs until June 2029. And I'm hoping in that period, and of course we're nearly 2 years up now, but I'm hoping that we will have built a very strong, recognisable Irish lobby voice within the Parliament. And when I say within the Parliament, I don't just mean MEPs. I mean the MEPs working with their staff, also working with their advisors in their political groups. Because remember, we have Fine Gael in the EPP. We have Luke Bing Flanagan, who is obviously independent. We have the Sinn Féin MEPs who are in the left group. So I'm talking about a little ecosystem whereby Commissioner Pettis and also DG PESH, because there is a Director General of that department out here, that they know the Irish are extremely vocal and extremely concerned about their fishermen and fisherwomen at home and about their communities. Because it's quite obvious that, I mean, I don't need to mention the figures and the loss of revenue and the reduction and so forth. I've spoken in Parliament about it. I've issued questions about it and so forth. But I mean, it's nothing short of disastrous. And these are fishermen and fisherwomen with boats, with huge debts. There's very few out there who haven't got a mortgage, got a big business loan in relation to them. And then there are families behind these people. And most of all, then, there are businesses, SMEs, that I also represent at European level. So many, many years ago, in a previous life, I used to be a Tuairisciúir go Chomhairsaí. It was an Irish language programme. It was current affairs. And we actually did a good few stories in the fishing and in the coastal communities. And even back then, you know, I remember very, very clearly how difficult a life it is. I mean, it really is a vocation. It's a bit like farming. So it's not easy for these people to be making a living. And it's certainly not easy because the regulation that they operate under is dominated by Europe. And there is very little that the Irish government can nuance, change, or that they can finesse when the directive or the regulation or whatever form of law it is comes from Europe. And so therefore, MEPs have got to be involved with the fishers in Ireland. And I know that some people listening to this, viewing this, will say, as I said earlier, I'm repeating myself now, we've heard all this before, we've seen it all before. But you know what? I just want to do my job and I want to try and do it well for the fishers. And I do think at this time, I've met a lot of lobby groups, Oliver, since I got elected. That's what happened. There are registered lobby groups that come to the Parliament. And if your line of work on your committees are relevant to them or relevant to your home country, they make their case and they come. Can I just say, I have never actually heard as bad a case as I've heard from the Fishing Alliance. It's very stark. And we might say, oh, look, GDP, what do fishermen contribute to? It's not all about GDP in the fishing industry, and even though it contributes quite a lot, but it is about employment in areas that don't have an Apple, a Google, or some other big tech firm or some other massive manufacturing industry. They actually, if we look at our coastal communities, we look at our fishing communities, they don't have an awful lot of other industry there to mop up people who may not have a job in fishing. And they also have a load of people involved on the in the harbour, on the port, in all these industries, whether it's welding, carpentry, whether it's the local supermarket, all of that. And they're the people that I want to invite to the meeting as well to talk about their SMEs and how much the fishing industry generates for them. Because I do know that what the fishermen and fisherwomen earn, it goes back into the local community. It's circular. It's exactly like farming. So I come from a farming background or a farming county, very good farming county, Carlow. But I also have a deep interest in fishing because for as long as I can remember, since I was about 21, and that's not today or yesterday, Oliver, I can tell you, but I've been going down to Baltimore in West Cork. And I've been doing the islands, obviously all around there and beyond into the southwest and into Kerry and on Langan. And then my previous background as of course, North the Den, all that. Like, I'm deeply interested in this because it's part of rural Ireland and I represent a rural constituency all the way from Wicklow, right? And by the way, we do have fishing industries on the southeast coast, and not leaving them out either, and they are part of the Fishing Alliance. But we do have fishing industries all the way down and up into County Clare. And whether they're big or small, whether they're just, they're inland or just offshore, whether out in the deep seas. And I do want to say, in particular, if you don't mind, just to say to the more inshore industry that and the smaller boats, if we want to call it that, in the body yoga, because we make I spoke on Radio Gaeltacht about it. I will of course be organising a dedicated meeting in relation to that. It's not because they are is so different, but they do have different issues, and I would prefer, in order to, I suppose, offer them something that's meaningful for them, I would prefer to have a meeting that's dedicated to them, and I have been in contact with them, but they are more than welcome to come to the meeting on Thursday night in Bearhaven Golf Club at 6:00. And so is everybody and anybody who's got an interest in fishing. And all I'd ask is that obviously everybody is professional. It is a public meeting, so sometimes, I suppose feelings can run high. People are upset. People are rightly upset about the way their industry is going and their livelihood. And that's very personal, I get that. But we just need to make sure that everybody is heard and everybody on the panel is listened to. And as I said, I do have my colleague, the Basque MEP, and actually Spain. One of the reasons why I asked Oyahan to come, this particular MEP, is because Spain actually was one of the few countries that didn't gang up on Ireland, so to speak, in the December meeting. Now I know there may be other issues with Spanish trawlers coming into the southwest and coming into our waters and so forth, but that's an issue that we just have to air in the room in a professional way and deal with it, because Oyahan and her Spanish MEPs will be, I hope, in our alliance, will be looking out for Irish interests when she goes back. And as I say, then we also will have Jesper. And I think overall, I want people to know that I'm not living in a bubble or operating or working in a bubble out in Brussels. I don't particularly want to learn about the fishing plight and problems through the internet, through briefings from an advisor or anybody else. I like to hear it from the ground up. And that was my stock and trade when I was a barrister. I met the client, I got it from the horse's mouth, and I made sure that I understood the problem from the person as opposed to the brief.
You're 100% right about the fact that the jobs that's been affected in the fishing industry does have a knock-on effect. Like the statistics are showing that, what is it, for every one job at sea, there's 7 jobs on land affected.
Exactly. You have the stats there. I just don't have them to hand. But I did speak about it in the Parliament. It's up on my social media, and I had all the stats at the time.
For people in their own community down in West Cork or southeast of Ireland or wherever it is, your fishing industry is not just their jobs, it can also affect your jobs.
Absolutely. Like another area that I know, yes, of course, another area that I know pretty well, because again, I used to do the Tuirski Nuachta down there for Cursey, and that is on Rhine, going the Fort Lauderdale, because I mean, it's so close to me. And of course, it's a fishing industry that isn't the biggest in the world. But the point about it is, in Ring, an area that I know so well, there is Colashton Arena that is able to generate some income for the local, for the locality. And obviously then there is Nematon, for example, and there are other industries down in Rhine, many of which there is Crystal Narina. There are others as well. I don't want to leave anybody out, but they know what they are. But the fishing industry is an integral part of the local economy. And well, I had a canvas down there when I was running for office. I actually went down and hopped onto the boat with some of the fishermen, because Laurimer obviously has and then as I spoke a while back, a couple of minutes ago, I spoke about the fact that the offshore wind industry is in development. I appreciate it's taking a while to come, but boats are going to be needed. Lots of boats for this industry. People have boats. They might be able to fish them because of all of the regulations and all of the statutes that they have to comply with, but they may be able to use it for another industry.
I grew up here in Downings at the time when the local boatyard closed, and see that industry be lost in the area was huge impact you can do to a community like, you know, it just changes the
Yeah, I can empathise with that, because I grew up in Carlow, so we spent a lot of our time in the southeast, you know, with relations and holidays and all that. But I can remember as a youngster the same effect that you've spoken about, the closure of the boatyard, the same effect in Arklow, for example. I can remember going down there with my parents, because, you know, you go on day trips or you'd be going down to see an aunt or an uncle or something. And I can remember my parents talking about that and the devastation for the town. So, yeah, I can equate with that. Look, rural Ireland has been hollowed out a lot. And, you know, if you want to move slightly offshore and inland, and if you want to just look at inland towns in Ireland's south, I can tell you the towns, you know, for example, the Gloucester sugar factories, whether it was Mallow or whether it was Carlow or, you know, whether it was Thurles. I mean, it took years for them to recover. And that hollowing out, you know, we just can't, we have to arrest it, because prices in Dublin, prices in Cork, prices in Limerick, they're beautiful cities, they're great cities, but way too high for your average worker. So we've got to make sure that communities can stay and get a job, yes, in the traditional industry, yes, in some aspect of the traditional industry, and know that they can put food on the table for themselves or for their family.
yeah, just very important. We're a country of a great skill set with so many different things, and they're quickly being lost. You know, I think when I was being at him, there was an old skipper who used to come out now and again, and he says to me one day, he says, you know, the fishing industry needs brains as well as brawn. And that is 100% right, because his knowledge of all the fishing areas around the north coast of Donegal, that's lost. Nobody knows that, because when he died, there was nobody really coming along to learn what he knew. Yeah, so you lose out on the whole knowledge phase. That's very important. Not
Exactly.
just for the fishing industry, but for, you know, for the environment and everything else to get there.
Well, I'm hoping we can shout a bit loud now at the end of this year when we have the presidency of the EU Council. Micheál Martin is going to be, Micheál Martin is going to be the president of the EU Council. He's going to be leading out on behalf of Ireland. We will be leaders of the Council, presidents of the Council of Europe from July to December. And I really want fishers to make a stamp on that 6 month. Fishermen and fisherwomen and the industry.
Hopefully now something will come of that. And suppose maybe in that period we might have a conversation about what is happening during the time of the presidency. So I'd love to have you back to talk about that. And
Certainly, gone in now.
Castletownbere golf course, 6 o'clock, Thursday, 19th February.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to chatting to you again online. And just to let people know that the format of the meeting, it's very regular. It's a cup on tea, ag sé chlog. Come in and have a cup of tea, cup of coffee. We're going to get cracking at around 6:30. We'll go for 3/4 of an hour with the panels. That'll be a quick intro from the panel. And then it'll be followed by questions from me to the panel. Then we're going to take a quick coffee break.
Well, looking forward to that, Cynthia. Thank you for joining us again, and talk to you soon.
We're meeting at the cane, slán go fóill.
If you like this episode or any of our other episodes, please hit the subscribe button and show your support for independent news in the fishing industry. Thank you.